Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting detailed diatribe. We just got through about half an hour of tech issues to try and get this thing going.
Usually they're so smooth, and this time it was like, feels like you guys are live streaming. I'm gonna mess this one up for you.
God damn, yeah, like the tech goblins normally only come out when we have a live audience, but this time it was like, no, you can't have a Discord call. No, you can't have an uninterrupted FaceTime call. Oh, you think FaceTime will work? Well, when you try to record FaceTime, inexplicably, we're going to drop the audio input that comes through GarageBand, a completely separate application, to almost zero. It's fine. It's fine. Macs are great.
Right, it feels like we're just a pair of doomed heroes trying to record this detailed diatribe.
I know. All these years, I thought I was the main character. Oh, okay. So, as you can see from that gorgeous segue, today I wanted to talk about this funny little movie called Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And specifically this thought that's been lurking in my head since this movie came out 8 years ago. Which I couldn't really put into words before now, which I've noticed is a kind of running theme with a lot of these detailed diatribes. It's a thing I've been thinking about for a long time, but not something that I've been able to articulate until, like, now. And I've prepared a fun little 34-slide slideshow. For more information, Google Star Wars Rule 34.
Damn it.
I can't believe we almost got you with that one. Anyway, so to kick us off today, without further ado, beating around the bush or potential opportunities for more tech issues, let's start off where the story started, with the very beginning of Star Wars. Back in 1977, George Lucas put out a fun little B-movie, a fun little space adventure, kind of drawing inspiration from some Kurosawa movies, some of the Flash Gordon sci-fi of the day, a lot of ray guns, all that good stuff, space dogfighting. It was a fun little adventure, very much down to the letter of Campbell's hero's journey, intentionally so. Lucas didn't, set out to do it, but apparently pretty early in the process, he was like, I was trying to make this, space folklore thing, and it turns out it's kind of lining up with this Campbell stuff, which is pretty interesting. So it's a very simple formula. There's very little wrong with it. It made $1 billion and rewired everyone's brains forever. None of you need to hear this, but it's important that we go through it, I think. For context. I love context. You guys know this. The focus of Star Wars is very much the protagonist, humble farm boy Luke Skywalker. He's a very standard issue fantasy protagonist. He's stuck on a farm. He's got an unquenchable thirst for adventure. He's got a dead dad with some kind of heroic past. He inherits his magic sword and then proceeds to not use it at all in this movie. It's a fun thing. I rewatched this quite recently, and it's strange to think about because this is a self-contained movie. It obviously spawned off one of the biggest franchises in the entire world, but it was intended to be a fun little standalone adventure, and you look at it and you're like, it's funny that they introduced the lightsaber and then we see it in use twice and then never again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that is a result of tech issues with the early concept of how to do the lightsabers with the rotoscoping.
Theme of
part
the
of
day.
the problem with the OG Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan fight is that the lightsabers were very fragile and very complicated to make work, so anything more than a mild strike would just snap the tubes in half, which is why the Darth Vader and Obi-Wan fight is so, for lack of a better word, soft. Because not only is Alec Guinness was an older gentleman at the time of filming this, he had experience with fencing, sure, but he was up there in his years, but those lightsabers were fragile, which also is kind of I understand why they didn't give Luke a million highly choreographed action sequences with this little toy until they figured out how to make it work a little better in Empire Strikes Back, and then he's using it all the goddamn time in Return of the Jedi. But it's it is odd that he really doesn't use the lightsaber much from a narrative point of view.
Well, it's a funny thing to think about because, of course, the whole "this is your father's sword, it's got strange power," that's straight out of the fantasy hero playbook. That's very much clearly why it's in the movie. But considering how iconic a piece of symbolism lightsabers have become, it's very funny to me that in the first movie it's almost like an afterthought. It's well, we can't have a humble farm boy with a magic destiny without giving him a sword. So he spends most of this movie with a blaster. He use the sword.
Obi-Wan dies and his first reaction is pew pew pew. But I'm imagining if this was like coded back into a samurai movie, it's like, yes, Luke, here is your father's katana, and Luke is like, well, I don't want to get it dirty. I'm gonna keep it in the sheath all the time.
Yeah, I guess I'll use this bow most of the time.
Don't mess it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So after a brief and efficiently choreographed introduction where Luke and his uncle Owen and Aunt Beru acquire a couple of wacky droids ripped straight from the pages of Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. And then Luke is like, boy, I sure do love the concept of adventure in the abstract. And his uncle's like, none of that. We need you to stick around for another year at least to not go on any exciting adventures. And nothing short of my untimely and horrific death would change my mind. Oh no, guess what happens next? In rapid succession, Luke acquires a princess to rescue, a wizardly mentor to guide him, and a bad case of bad guys killed my inconvenient obstructionist relatives. So, okay, well, cool. Now that that's all cleaned up, he can go off and have a fun space adventure, save the princess with the help of his mentor. He's, as I say in the slide, the kind of fantasy protagonist you can buy in a 6-pack at Costco. He's very by the numbers. Star Wars: A New Hope is a good chill fun time. It is a fun movie. It is goofy as all hell. Our protagonists banter, swashbuckle. The bad guys never even scratch them in this movie. I mean, there are casualties, but they are very much like background extras or mentors. And come on, mentors don't count.
And even when Obi-Wan dies, he's like, all right, Luke, check this shit out.
Yeah, he does the little knowing smirk, like, you know it's part of his scheme, even before he comes back as a glowy little blue ghost.
Yeah, it is remarkable how fun and goofy this movie is. I had the pleasure of seeing it last year in a theater for like a screening event. And seeing it in a packed theater was like, oh, I get this now. Like, obviously I had seen episode 4 before, and it's like, yeah, no, this is good. Like, Star Wars is great. But seeing it in such an electric room like that, I immediately was like, yeah, no, like, people who live and die by the OT, I fully get it in this moment. I understand. I've been initiated in a way that I couldn't have before without seeing it in that kind of environment. It is such an interesting tone for a movie to have.
Yeah.
It is not what you remember it being if you haven't seen it recently. Your memory kind of sands the edges of it off, but this movie is dumb as shit in places, and it's so fun.
It's fun. That's mostly, that's the profound thing. There are a lot of fun little, like, twists in Star Wars, not just in this movie, but also in the 2 sequels. Like, the fact that Princess Leia has a personality is a plot twist. Because, like, initially we're only seeing her in, like, kind of soft focus, like, Gaussian vision, like, oh, my father pleads with you for help, Jedi Master. I recognize your foul stench when you were brought on board. Please don't blow up my planet. And then as soon as she meets our protagonist, she's like, this is your idea of a rescue? My God, the galaxy's in worse shape than I thought. Quick, down the trash chute, Flyboy. And it's like, oh my God, this rules. It's just all fun quips and banter. They spend a lot of the escape in that trash compactor. It's like most of it. And
it's like a 10-minute sequence, right?
It takes a hot minute, and like it's fun and interesting and not very clean. The funny thing is, like, everyone just kind of gets out of the garbage chute, and then immediately they're all looking very like freshly shampooed, and it's like, nah, sorry, the Falcon's gonna be smelling worse than usual for a little while after everybody gets on the nice leather seats. But it's like a goofy, fun stock fantasy adventure. We save the princess, we get on out of there, but then the third act is like, oh, you thought we were done? Nuh-uh. Obviously, we need to destroy the Empire's hidden fortress. I mean, Death Star. There's a very funny bit, because if you know, I've seen Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. It's interesting. It's paced oddly by modern standards, but it's got some very highlighting moments, and you can really tell, like, oh, okay, yeah, Lucas looked at that and was like, I want that. Let me take that. But there's a very funny bit early on when the Empire goons are all talking about, like, oh, the rebels, blah, 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 fully operational battle station, something, something. The first time we see Vader force choke a guy, the guy gets cut off mid-sentence as he is saying the words Hidden Fortress.
Oh my God, I didn't realize
yeah, it's like, no, shh. They'll find out. But yeah, and then suddenly the third act of this movie, like, Luke, who has up to now been kind of a naive farm boy out of his depth, doing his best, suddenly is like, oh yeah, we sort of established that I'm like a good pilot. I'm a really good pilot. And suddenly, in the final act, it's like a fucking World War II dogfight drama, trench run. It still looks incredible. Like,
yeah.
I know they were doing it with miniatures and comping and stuff. I still don't know how they did a lot of those shots. It looks amazing.
Admittedly, there is some stuff that they did in post,
right?
Like post, like special editions post, and they get a lot of flack for the dumbass like aliens that they put way in the foreground in like 2002 or whenever it was that they made the special editions. But there are a lot of more subtle tweaks that just make things look a lot better, that are not obtrusive and thus are not mentally logged into yes, the special editions.
Yeah.
Well, because there are 3. There's the original that was the theatrical release where Jabba the Hutt's just a guy.
Oh yeah, that's a weird one.
They made him the puppet, and then they made him the CG in the special editions. But there are genuinely a handful of changes that did improve the way that it looks. But, Red, to your point, the original trench run with the ILM miniatures and all that stuff still looks so goddamn good. And if the foundation wasn't good, it would have aged terribly to now, and there's no amount of post you can do to save that.
Yeah.
But the original foundational effects work was spectacularly done.
Yeah, I wanted to say, because clearly one of the reasons why this rewired everyone's brains is like watching the final act and being like, oh my god, we can do this now? Like we can make movies look like this? I've seen other classic movies that had that effect that didn't have anywhere near as strong a movie behind them. I recently watched Dragon Slayer, which I think came out in like 1981 or something similar to that. And it is not a good movie. It's got some unbelievably impressive effects in it. The final act of that looks amazing, but unfortunately that's kind of the only good thing about the movie. Whereas with Star Wars, it's like the third act looks incredible. The trench run is amazing. All these effects look really, really solid. And underlying it is a completely serviceable, simple meal well made. A good hero's journey with likable protagonists with great chemistry with each other. Just kind of vibing their way through this fun little adventure. And then it got 2 sequels that iterated on this formula, because by the end of the movie, of course, our heroes have succeeded in their plan to destroy the Death Star, but like Darth Vader kind of just went off into space, so he's still out there, and they keep mentioning the Emperor, but it's not like they ever deal with him in this movie, so there are things left unfinished that could potentially be resolved. And all the characters, they've got, they've reached the ends of their main arcs. So like Luke went from like dreaming of being a hero to actually being a hero, and Han went from being in it just for himself to saving the day even at great personal cost, and Leia doesn't really have an arc. Her main twist was that she had a personality, but she's just kind of vibing, running the rebellion, doing her best. So there was things to do in the sequels of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Expanded on the characterization of the Emperor, and especially Darth Vader. It got a lot more focus, a lot more interesting stuff. Luke, being the center of the story, went from being like humble farm boy who's just kind of doing his best to like, oh yeah, surprise information about your relationship with the big bad and also the princess and also this other stuff. And it's just, so he suddenly becomes like more complicated and more, his role in the story becomes more central. Because in the first movie, we learn like, oh, your father was a Jedi Knight. The Force is this powerful thing that binds all things together. Use it to guide you. And then in the second and third movie, it's like, you can also use it to float shit and psychically reach out to Princess Leia when you're dangling over a big abyss. And
that's actually, is there any use of Force telekinesis in Episode 4?
I don't. No, Obi-Wan does use the Force to make a little noise so that the stormtroopers go that way while he goes this way. And he does mind trick a couple dudes.
Yeah, he does mind tricks.
Mostly it's used as like, oh, the Force is guiding us. This is the will of the Force. It seems mostly perception-based, like a mental thing in the first movie. And then in the second movie, things get a little bit more complicated. It suddenly becomes a much more physical form
the only
of magic.
person who uses Force telekinesis is Vader when he chokes the guy.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Vader choking the guy. Yeah,
like, there's something I'm missing here.
When the guy gets choked out mid saying Hidden Fortress. Yeah, that thing. But like, so we know that bad guys can use that kind of stuff, but that's kind of it. Yeah, because it would have been a weird jump from like it surrounds and binds us to like, and also we can use it to move shit with our minds if there was no precedent for it in the first movie. But yeah, so basically, while the first movie has its own little hero's journey, if you look at the trilogy as a whole, it traces a very standard iteration of Campbell's hero's journey. Empire Strikes Back famously ends on an extremely like devastating note. Han is frozen, Luke just lost a hand and learned that Darth Vader is his dad, and Obi-Wan lied to him. It's very much a belly of the whale situation.
Can you imagine the alternate version of Episode 5? The Empire just kind of takes it lying down. the Empire rolls over and lets the rebellion just do whatever.
The Empire gets dunked on. So it's interesting, but it's still kind of following that sort of heroic fantasy framework of the first movie. Luke is still very much kind of the center of the universe. It's turning out that this whole thing is a very destined encounter. It's like, oh yes, this Jedi Knight fell to the dark side because he was seduced by the dark side of the Force, the Emperor, etc., etc. Now his 2 kids are running around. It's a very standard space of tropes, basically. It's a classic heroic adventure. Good triumphs. Love conquers all. Our heroes sometimes suffer bad things, but it's kind of the outlier. Most of the time they are having a good time, sharing quips, optimistic about the universe as a whole, doing their best. They're protagonists. In a certain way, they are kind of the center of the universe. I
will say, though, in episode 6, I was amazed by how much the first act of the movie is just cleaning up the mess from the end of episode 5.
Yeah.
Because it's all the whole Han Solo rescue thing, and Luke is in a pretty nasty spot mentally, where it's like, oh, he's dressing darkly, he's acting kind of like sus and aggressive towards Jabba. Is he gonna like turn to the dark side like his father before him? And is like, well, obviously he gets better, kind of gets it together. But I was impressed by the commitment to untangling the web of stuff that was pretty messed up at the end of the last movie.
Yeah.
I noticed it when playing through the Lego Star Wars game. I'm like, oh, a lot of these missions are just like fixing shit that went wrong at the end of the last one. Dang.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long climb out of the belly of the whale, but I still hold that like the original trilogy is still very much a heroic adventure. It's got a very simple tone. As I've discussed in my Trope Talk on Tone Armor, there are certain expectations that are set by the way a story works. And with the original trilogy, it is pretty much accurate to say that our heroes are the center of the universe. They're the main characters of a PG adventure movie for kids. They got plot armor, they got narrative importance, so their experiences are not universal. And for a while, this was all that Star Wars was. It was these 3 movies and a couple specials we don't talk about. So the prequels are a completely different genre. In like the early 2000s, I want to say, George Lucas was like, oh, I got another one of these in me. Let's do a fun little story about how Anakin fell to the dark side. And the funny thing about a tragic backstory is that it's going to end in a tragedy. A story can have a tragic backstory and still be a very heroic adventure story. That's what we just saw with the original trilogy. But we know that the prequels are destined to end with absolutely everything crashing and burning, which means the genre conventions are going to look a little bit different. So they're clearly an attempt to kind of recast the original trilogy by revealing the horror and grief of just the backstory that get glossed over. Oh yes, a pupil of mine until he turned evil. He hunted down and exterminated the Jedi. And it's like, oh yeah, wow, okay, cool. But this is like, and you're gonna see it happen, and it's like, oh no, suddenly this feels the
You mentioned that the biggest noodle incident in media might be the Clone Wars.
You fought in the Clone
one-line
Wars?
sentence getting turned into 3 movies and 2 shows.
So the prequels are full of doomed heroes. We have no doomed heroes in the original trilogy, but in the prequels, pretty much everybody we meet is doomed by the narrative to either die or slot into the role that we know that they have in the original movies. So like, we know Obi-Wan is going to survive, but we also know he's going to end up living like a hermit on Tatooine and hiding. We know that Anakin is going to survive, quote unquote, but like, we also know he's going to get some bits lopped off him in the process and fall to the dark side, and bunch of stuff is gonna happen.
He didn't put on the suit because it was Versace.
Yeah. In the first movie, it's not at all established.
What kind of sentence was that?
I don't know. Sometimes you just say things, man, and I just kind of yes-and it. But yes, I think it's not until Empire Strikes Back Vader starts getting focused as a character beyond just the face of evil that the Empire is, and that's when he's more machine than man now comes up. But like, we don't get any context for that shit in the first movie. He's just a guy with a fun helmet. So we don't get that detail until, then. But by the end of the original trilogy, it's all firmly established. We know basically what's going to happen to Anakin and how he's going to have to look roughly by the end of it, because we saw him with his mask off at the end of Return of the Jedi, and it's like, ooh, that's rough, buddy. So we go into the prequels and we're like,
didn't put on the suit because it was Versace.
Yeah, I guess not.
I'll tell you that.
Put that shit on a t-shirt, maybe. So the prequels did this interesting thing where even some characters who weren't supposed to die get killed. Like Padme, because Leia mentions that she has childhood memories of her. Like, oh yes, do you remember our mother? Yes, she seemed sad. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that tracks with...
That's not how the Force works.
Yeah, that doesn't really seem like how babies work. I don't know. I mean, that's also not how pregnancy works, so maybe they didn't have a consultant on that movie to tell them literally anything about biology or human reproduction, but it's fine. So you go through the prequels and you're like, most of this isn't really surprising me, except in the execution. Like, I know all these people are fucked. I know Darth Vader is going to happen and help the Empire hunt down the Jedi and whittle them down to the Jedi, or, to just... basically Obi-Wan like we know. The problem is the execution is so goofy that nobody takes the prequels seriously.
And that's the best part.
Well, that's the thing. That's the best part, but it means that the prequels ultimately failed in their goal to recast the Star Wars universe as the kind of universe where this sort of Shakespearean tragedy can play out. Sorry,
What a great selection of memes.
I'll give you time to take them in. I did my homework. I went through the top all time on the prequel memes subreddit and stole maliciously.
One must study all its aspects. God damn it. Thoughts dwell on your mother. Oh, my thoughts dwell on your mother. Jesus Christ. Anakin the Jedi. Yep. Classic.
Yep.
Oh, God.
This is why the prequels are such a fun time, but they're not supposed to be.
Every line is such a joy. This is, I don't know if the Kenobi series shows up later in this.
It does
this
not, but we can
slideshow.
bring it up here if we want.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason that I do love the Kenobi series is that the parts of it that are drama are pretty good drama, and the parts of it that are stupid are so fucking funny that I fully treat it as prequels 3.5 as opposed to episode 4 minus a half, which people who grew up with the original trilogy are like, this isn't the right tone at all. And me growing up with the prequels, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this fits. This shit works great.
What, you're telling me that bit where Obi-Wan smuggles out Leia by doing the two kids in a trench coat gambit? You're telling me you didn't take that shit seriously?
Oh my god, it was so funny. Prequel memes are the best.
Yes.
It is so tonally the wrong outcome, but god damn, it makes them so much fun to watch.
Yes, they are hilarious, but they are all kinds of wrong for what they were trying to accomplish, which is interesting to examine from a meta standpoint. Because Star Wars started off as a pretty basic space-themed coat of paint on all the hits of the fantasy tropes of the day. You got wizards, magic swords, princesses, humble farm boys with secret lineages, dashing rogues, yada yada yada. Basically, it's just like a find and replace. Instead of kingdom, we have planet. Instead of magic, we have the Force. The interchangeable evil guards have blasters instead of crossbows, and your father's magic sword has an on-off switch. It's not complicated. It's very much by the numbers up until it becomes the World War II dogfight at the end, which is extremely rad. I will give it that singular point. It did one extremely cool original thing by recasting World War II dogfight movies into space instead of fantasy wizard stuff. So the prequels...
Which is what's otherwise pretty different from it and the rest of the Sword and Planet is that you don't really get that kind of high techitude on most Sword and Planet movies, at least not to facilitate World War II dogfight.
It's a lot of very interesting things. Original Star Wars is kind of like it's a hodgepodge of a lot of different aesthetics and tropes kind of getting mashed together in creative ways. But what it is not is a tragedy. And the prequels constructed an extremely different vibe. The focus was on political intrigue, was on like the innate corruption and selfishness of the bad people that were present in the original. Because, like, in the original, it's like the Emperor is evil because he is the evil Emperor of the evil Empire. And then in the prequels, it's like, why is the Emperor evil? And it's just like, he just wants to rule the entire galaxy, man. He's just selfish and power hungry. There's nothing deeper than that. He just sucks.
He just sucks. As far as I'm aware, it was not revealed outright that the Emperor was Emperor Palpatine until, like, people could probably see the writing on the wall pretty thickly in the Chancellor's office. But my background knowledge is that it was a big air quotes twist that Palpatine turns into the Emperor. Yeah.
Well, because it was, because Chancellor Palpatine was just vibing, but there was this evil hooded cloaked guy who was definitely Palpatine, or like the Emperor. He was definitely going to be the Emperor. I know people who watched the movies as they were coming out who figured out the twist early because they recognized his extremely identifiable chin, but that was basically it. So you get this very interesting vibe with the prequels that you just don't get in the original trilogy, which is human tragedy. Like people having complex motivations that are in conflict with one another, like Anakin's fall to the dark side being inspired by love and selfishness and a certain degree of like love that gets corrupted into clinginess and there's a word I'm looking for that's not clinginess.
Obsession?
Obsession, I guess, is part of it.
In my mind, it's just like that feeling when you want more, but you know you shouldn't. It's all memes.
Oh, boy. It's trying to tell a human tragedy, but it is so bad at it that it's easy to lose sight of like what the intent behind it was. But like the energy, the tone of the prequels is completely different from what we'd already seen in Star Wars, and that ends up making the genre, it makes the setting feel richer, theoretically. It felt like it was trying to take the training wheels off the entire world of like, okay, yeah, this was all fun and games when it was Luke Skywalker and his wacky band of misfits going off on adventures, this is an extremely different story, and these characters are not safe. And some of that is effective. Like, Order 66, the execution in the movies is pretty goofy. Like, it's not the goofiest, but it's pretty goofy. Which is why it was kind of impressive when, like, in Clone Wars, they managed to build it up as this horrifying, dreaded event. Revenge of the Sith tricks you into thinking it's going to be a good movie until, like, the last half hour, because it's pretty decent up until that point. Like, it's certainly better than the first two prequels.
Everything up through when they crash land on Coruscant is, as far as I'm concerned, flawless.
And then, like, Anakin's fall to the dark side is kind of and then Mace Windu goes through that window, and everything goes to shit so fast, and it's so stupid and makes no sense. But
yeah, a little bit.
But in Clone Wars, they almost turn that into the horror, because it's like, we know it's coming. We know, like, okay, this is the day. This is the day it happens. But then it's like, oh, that's right. It happens in like 10 minutes.
It's fascinating seeing everyone else's perspective of, like, what the fuck is happening. Because when we see it from the perspective of the Chancellor's office, it's like, okay, flip this switch, flip that switch, throw that guy out a window. Great, we're good. Let's get to it. But from everyone else's perspective, the clones just turn, and it's like, what?
Yeah, that can happen. And, like, that can happen is kind of the running motif of the prequels. The heroes in the prequels do not have the same plot armor that the heroes of the original trilogy had, and the audience knew that from the outset. Which is interesting because, like, implicit in the setting of Star Wars is that this universe is a dark and tragic place where a lot of people die very unceremoniously. But there's a difference between showing that happening and making the audience feel that it's happening. There's a very important distinction. And before Rogue One, which we will get to in a minute, this was almost all very distant kind of tell, don't show. Like, oh no, Alderaan just exploded, but the camera is going to stay on the people who aren't about to explode. You know, they're not going to just get taken out by a sky beam with no warning. And we never really believed that anybody important could die. And, like, maybe in another universe where Han Solo never got unfrozen, maybe then we'd be like, oh boy, what a dark and tragic story. But that didn't happen. He was fine.
Yeah. There is something to be said for the tell versus showing of stuff in Star Wars, and how I think the prequels are a bit of a kaleidoscope for how people consider that rule, because the story of the prequels that exists in most people's heads is much more interesting than the version that exists in the movies.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that the Clone Wars and associated media is good is a testament to how there is a good story in the middle of this. The prequels just aren't what that is.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating space that, not to kind of call back to, like, Spider-Man Episode 3, or Spider-Man 3, as, like, how you see this movie tells everything that anyone needs to know about how you consider all media. Not to go that far, but it is interesting to hear how people talk about the prequels, hear what they think, what they value, how they consider the way stories work, because it is such a disconnect, Red, again, to your point, between the story they were trying to tell and the story they indicate that they are telling, and the story that actually comes across. And those are three different things. And how an audience reacts to that is, I find, very informative and interesting to pick apart. Not to turn that into too much of a tangent, but it's an interesting little bit of setup that I think will come in handy as we get to the next little section of the slideshow.
Yeah.
So let's keep it moving. Let's go.
No, I mean, yeah, what you made is an interesting point, because, like, the thing is, there's, like, a tweet I've seen going around that's like, every week Star Wars fans say some variant of Star Wars would be so good if it was good. And, like, truly, Star Wars is the franchise that would be the most good if it were good. Yeah, the prequels were really trying to correct for this sort of tone armor by letting tons of characters die. Named ones, background ones, kids. But the execution was so goofy, and it just didn't really feel like the tragedy it was trying to be, that we didn't really feel that emotional impact we were supposed to, especially not, like, when we overthought it. Like, I'm sure some kids who saw this thing in theaters were like, whoa, it's so sad how all that happened. But, like, as soon as you go back and watch it, you're like, oh no. Oh, no, the dialogue. The dialogue is so bad that can make Samuel L. Jackson look like a bad actor. I think we can safely say the problem was in the writer's room and not with the actors. So the end result is that the universe of Star Wars ends up feeling more contrived and fictional and goofy. It ends up feeling more bound by the laws and of, like, trope land than by any sort of human element. The prequels set out to tell a human story of tragedy and greed and grief, and it just did not do that, because nobody in these movies feels like a real human being. But good news, they did eventually do that. And now it's time to talk about what the slideshow is about after 15 slides of setup. So in 2016, we got Rogue One. The entire concept of Rogue One is bound up in the opening crawl of A New Hope. Leia has acquired a copy of the plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, capital letters. Rebel spies have managed to steal them and get them into her hands. That is it. That's what this movie is. So those plans are the MacGuffin for the entire opening act of the story. They facilitate that awesome space dogfight, final act trench run thing. So Rogue One sought to answer the question that nobody was asking, which was, hey, that thing about Rebel spies sounded kind of cool. What's up with that?
Again, a noodle incident getting its whole spinoff.
Exactly. Finally, it's day in the sun. So Rogue One answered that question by giving us this crack team of protagonists, tragically devoid of plot armor. And their story basically laid out how nightmarish it would actually be to be a normal person just trying to do their best in the universe of Star Wars. Because the rebellion exists in the original trilogy, of course it does, but in large part it exists to be the thing that Luke joins when he decides to go be the hero. It's the infrastructure that he wanted to join because he hates the Empire, casually, just in the background. And this was like, hey, every single rebel was somebody who chose to lay down their life for a cause they believed in and something they might never see the end of. And they didn't know Luke Skywalker was going to show up and save the day. So what's it like to be somebody in the Star Wars universe who doesn't know that Luke Skywalker is going to come along in like a week and save the day? So the interesting thing about the protagonists of Rogue One is that they are very much store brand, underleveled versions of the archetypes we're familiar with from the original trilogy. But unlike our heroes, they don't have magical destiny or narrative conventions to protect them from all the shit that's about to happen to them. It's really a glimpse of like, what would the power trio from A New Hope look like if they did not have all that plot armor and being the main characterness? How well would they fare in a universe that was not trying to save them specifically? So,
I do want to linger on your descriptions of these characters for a second.
Okay.
It's very funny.
Oh, thanks.
Especially what if C-3PO pulled his weight and was an asshole?
Oh god, I love K2SO so much, but boy, he's very I guess C-3PO is kind of store brand him, honestly.
Yeah.
What if K2SO only complained?
It's like that upgrade key meme. Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting things about this cast that I think I might get into later more. One of the interesting characters in this movie is Chirrut Imwe, who, first of all, has one of the coolest fight scenes in the movie, obviously. Like, you don't get Donnie Yen if you're not going to let him kick ass a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a few interesting things about him, which is, first of all, he's blind. And one of the first uses we saw for the Force was, hey, cover your eyes and use the Force to sense your surroundings. So he's got that. He's very much Force sensitive. But he cannot do any of that telekinesis junk. There's a Chekhov's gun that goes unfired all movie. He has access to a kyber crystal the entire time. It never gets used for anything that kyber crystals are used for, which is mostly being lightsabers. So, like, it's just a thing to believe in. It's not a tool that gets used to become a weapon to save our heroes.
Which, frankly, I like more the way that they use it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting to me, because, like, if these guys were main characters, the fact that Chirrut Imwe is Force sensitive and has access to a kyber crystal would be the biggest Chekhov's gun that would pay off in the finale and turn into a little weapon that can save their lives. I'm pretty sure that even happens in the how it should have ended for this movie.
But, like, literally, think of what would happen if Chirrut was actually a Force user in the typical sense. His big move at the end of Scarif is to go across a field and flip a switch.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan or Luke could have done that no problem.
That's the thing.
But Chirrut doesn't have that luxury. So he has to pull out his badass moment here, and it's much more interesting to see what someone who is very competent and very skilled, but not a chosen one, does with that.
Yeah, Chirrut is very cool because he believes in the Force, but he cannot use the Force.
Yeah.
So he can't use it as a tool to save himself, but it does protect him as he walks across the field. All those shots miss until he does what he needs to do. And that's a very interesting invocation of the Force, because there's a theme in Rogue One that we're going to get to from a lot of different angles. But one of them is essentially like, it's not believing in something if you know it's going to work out for you. Hope is the word of the day, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the premise of Rogue One is that all these guys are basically like working together to steal the plans. There's a lot of setup. Protagonist Jyn Erso is the daughter of the guy who designed the Death Star. He reveals that he built the flaw into it intentionally as an act of subtle rebellion so that it would be possible to destroy the Death Star. And essentially he was like, they're going to build it with or without me, but this way I can give other people a chance to stop it. And that's kind of the word of the day, again, from a different angle. I can't stop this, but I can give the next person a chance.
Yeah.
And that is the entire final act of this movie. Stealing the plans is a relay race. You pass the baton by dying. The first of our heroes to die is K2SO. It's heartbreaking, honestly, because K2SO complains about everything except as he's dying. And that makes me so sad every time, because he's outside. Jin and Cassian are in the vault, and they don't even know that stormtroopers are coming after them, because K just keeps instantly shooting them as soon as they come in the door, and not telling them on the inside that, like, this is happening. And he doesn't basically let on that anything is happening until he is shutting down to the point where his voice starts kind of malfunctioning. And he basically tells them, you can still get the plans to the fleet, climb, and then he shuts down. And it's so fucking sad. But that's kind of the moment where it's like, uh-oh, hey guys, they just killed our funny droid guy. Those guys aren't supposed to die even if they do explode, which has happened to R2 like 4 times. I think maybe the genre conventions of this movie are different. And of course, the next one is Chirrut. As mentioned, he trusts in the Force, and he walks unscathed through this hail of blaster fire. He throws the switch that will open communications to the Rebel fleet. Seconds later, a stray shot takes him out and he dies. And his bodyguard / beleaguered life partner / husband Baze follows shortly thereafter. He doesn't really play as much a role in the baton race. He doesn't have a task associated, but before he gets taken out, he kind of reaffirms his previously abandoned faith in the Force, which Chirrut had been kind of chiding him over for the entire movie. So in his last moments, he basically reaffirms, like, oh, the Force is with us, maybe. Bodhi, this is the saddest one. This one made me the saddest, I think. He manages to transmit the message to the rebels that they need to get the planet's shield down so that Jin and Cassian can send the Death Star plans to the fleet. And he gets the message through, and second later, a stray grenade takes him out. And a lot of people were like, he didn't have to die. And it's like, none of these people had to die, but none of them have anything protecting them.
Yeah.
All they need, and the thing is, like, you could argue that the Force is playing the role in this conversation of the narrative. It is the will of the narrative that the Death Star plans make them to the fleet because they need them for A New Hope to happen, so we know it's going to happen. The Force protects Chirrut Imwe right up until he does the thing that the Force needs to happen, and then he dies. And the Force protects Bodhi right up until he gets the message out, and then he dies. Yeah. So that's a way to look at it.
It's a very flaky kind of plot armor where, in the original trilogy, the characters are basically implicitly protected the whole way through. Mm-hmm. And in this, we know the characters need to succeed, but they are given absolutely nothing beyond that.
Yeah.
So as soon as they get their one assigned task done, their integral link in this chain of making this transfer happen, the Force is like, all right, you've done it. Whatever else happens is on you now. Mm-hmm. And then this being an active war zone blows up everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to see what it looks like when the Force is there just enough to make the plot move and get things to where they need to go, and then it pulls the hands off and blaster bolts and grenades just start flying.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be had here about, like, how much does the Force have a will? And how much should we read into the story from that perspective? Because is it more meaningful if all these people tried their very hardest and were very lucky and took these chances until the chances ran out and they opened the door that let Luke be the big hero? Is it more meaningful if it was all them? Or is it more meaningful if the will of the universe itself couldn't save them, but it could help them just enough to make sure that it was all worth it in the end? Because that's the thing that this movie keeps coming back to. It's built on hope. Rebellions are built on hope. And, like, it's a fun tagline. It goes great on the poster. But what it means is that none of these characters who join the rebellion are guaranteed anything. They're not guaranteed victory. They're not guaranteed survival. They are all risking potentially everything in the hope that they will be able to take down this seemingly unstoppably terrifying and powerful force of the Empire and the Death Star. None of them can do it alone. They all know this, but they are hoping that somehow, maybe not now, but somehow somebody will be able to do it. None of these people ever meet Luke. He never learns any of their names. They don't even mention them. They mention the Bothans who died. We don't even know who those guys are. But none of these guys come up. And that's the thing. Like, they all did this because they believed it was worth it. And Cassian has a bit of a speech that says pretty much that in explicit English. He's basically like, look, I've done really horrific things in service to the rebellion, and I have to believe it was for a reason. You know, I wouldn't be able to face myself and all the things I've done if I didn't believe it was building to something that was worth it. And that's the thing. Hope is hard work. Hope is not an easy thing. It's not a guarantee. It's not painless. It is an act of trust in people you might never meet, who might never know that you existed, or anything that you lost or sacrificed. It is hope. And it's the entire backbone of this movie. It is very much based on faith in not necessarily in like the higher power that is the Force, but in just like in each other, in the future, in the ideals of the rebellion, in the idea that somebody is out there listening. And so Rogue One absolutely succeeds in its goal of being sad as all fuck, which is good. It's a hard rewatch, I gotta say. I think this is the first time I've rewatched it since we saw it in theaters.
I'll have to rewatch it at some point. I don't know who says what of do you think anybody's listening? I do. Someone's out there. Interesting, like, pre-callback to Narkina 5. Nobody's listening.
Don't worry, we'll get there.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I think Cassian said, do you think anybody's listening? And she said, I do, somebody's out there. So the thing is that Rogue One, everything it does enriches the original trilogy in a lot of fun, subtle ways. First of all, the interchangeable MacGuffin suddenly starts feeling incredibly weighty, because when we see it getting passed around or hidden in R2 while R2's doing his fun shenanigans, we're like, 6 people we love died for that thing. And more characters who were also like, because there is a little bit of a shot where it's like, a bunch of rebels join the Rogue Squadron to go off and do this thing, even though the rebellion as a whole was like, it's too risky, we can't afford to do it, which is like, hey, I'm sorry, I thought we all signed up for a rebellion. What's going on, guys? But like, that's an important thing. Like, a lot of these people are like, we have something to lose if this goes wrong. This is far too much of a risk. And these guys were like, well, I got nothing going on. This is fine. So there's a bunch of just like nameless people, you know, all ages, and they're all doing their best. And later the rebel squad, like the full rebel fleet comes and helps them out when they realize like, oh, the Rogue Squadron absolutely went against orders and is now down there by themselves. We should go help them out. And it's a lot of really beautiful moments, but nobody gets off the planet's surface. Everybody who goes down there dies. And it is heartbreaking to think about, but like, all of these people chose to give their lives for this dream. And the funny thing is, this movie is such a series of emotional gut punches, and then like the mood lightener at the end of the movie is watching Darth Vader slaughter another corridor full of rebels. And it's so weird to think about, but like, it really does kind of make you feel better. Because like,
it's the weirdest tone whiplash in possibly any movie that I've seen, because it works.
Yeah, because the thing is, we like to see villains be bad. We like it when Vader is wrecking shop because we love it when he's terrifying. And this is another case that is being inadvertently enriched by all the other Star Wars stuff that has come out. Like, Darth Vader becomes more interesting or less effective, depending on your particular read on it, when you look at him and see Anakin, you know? When you look at him and see that little boy or that romantic young man, and you're like, how could he have become this? You know, that can make you feel like, wow, there's a tragedy there. Or it can make you feel like, well, I'll try spitting. That's a good trick. And, you know, so like, whether or not the prequels make Vader more or less intimidating is, well, I know which way I'm skewing. But when you look at something like this, and you see Vader as this unstoppably terrifying force of nature, using the Force in a way that nobody in this movie is capable of doing. Because, like, he's levitating people, he's slamming doors on people, he's cutting people in half while he has them stuck to the ceiling. Like, it's not even a thing. And you're like, oh my god, this kind of fucking rules, actually. Like, you're so used to running around in this, like, miserable, extremely low power level, nobody has plot armor, everyone is disposable, we've just watched all of our heroes die. And then we get a reminder of what the rest of this story is going to look like, and the problem that our next set of heroes is going to have to overcome. And also, in the back of our mind, we're going, LeBeo, that's my boy. Fuck him up. It's hard to describe.
It's so weird, because you're watching it on like 2 or 3 different levels, where it's fun to see Vader wreck shop and be the dramatic bitch that he always is and always was. I know some people disagree with that, but Vader's always been a dramatic bitch. You see that hip sway in the corridor in episode 4. He was always like that. He was always like that.
Oh, yeah.
But then seeing the rebels, once again, a baton race where you pass the data pad to someone else and then get stabbed. And the tension of they got the plans to the rebels. Holy shit, run!
Yeah, get the fuck out of there, Leia!
Yeah, leading to the best line read by an extra in possibly any movie where the guy slams the door shut and yells, "Launch!"
Yeah.
It's so good. It is a weighty sequence. The music, the lighting, where the only source of light is that red saber in the blaster bolts.
We saw this in
so
IMAX,
well done.
and it was amazing.
Oh my god. It is a powerful sequence where, as much as you just saw the Death Star blow up a whole fucking planet, when Vader's in that hallway, you feel how wildly outclassed the rebellion is on a pure power level. And the scope of their accomplishment in the face of that becomes even more impressive. They didn't just fight a bunch of, no-name faceless stormtroopers. They evaded Darth fucking Vader.
And that's what's so cool about this, is like, up until this point, Director Krennic is basically the villain of this movie. And he's interesting. I'll get to him on the next slide. But he's very like, well, actually, we can just go to the next slide now. He's very like petty middle manager bullshit. Like, he's the most human the evil of the Empire has ever felt, because he's not this cackling space wizard. He's not a sword-swinging cyborg space wizard. He's just this like kind of unpleasant middle manager with delusions of grandeur who angles for a promotion by ordering the murder of thousands with a space laser. Like, he sucks so bad, and he's so extremely punchable. But Darth fucking Vader is a horror movie villain. So, like, our heroes in this movie have been dealing with this guy, tops. And, like, really only Jyn has personal beef with him because he killed her dad and stuff, and her mom. Killed both her parents. He sucks in general. But, like, nobody else in this movie has ever seen the guy, basically. They don't really care about him. He's just another petty Empire middle manager. He's not the top brass. Everyone else gets taken out by random blaster fire, random troopers. And it's tragic, because basically they are casualties in a war. So when we get to see our boy, Lil Annie, fucking swanging around, cutting people in half, we're like, that's my boy! Like, it is fun to watch the terrifying horror movie monster chase not our heroes, because they wouldn't get out of there, but chase the thing they all just died for. And we know, like all the best horror movies, we know how it's gonna end. We know the plans are gonna get to Leia. We know that she's gonna get him out of there before Vader catches up. But this adds so much tension to that, because that means at the beginning of A New Hope, when Leia gets captured and Vader comes on board and is like, where are the plans? She's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, sir. It's like so much funnier because he literally just saw her leaving. He's like,
which also retroactively completely in character for Leia.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know that she's been such a good asset to the rebellion simply because she can straight-facedly be like, this is a diplomatic mission. Go fuck yourself, sir. Oh, she's so cool. And there's all these little moments in Rogue One that remind you, like, here's where we're going. Like, we see Bail Organa, and he's like, there's a friend of mine. I'll send a messenger to him. I trust her with my life. And it's like, yeah, but get back to Alderaan nice and quick. We wouldn't want you uncharacteristically surviving. But yeah, I think that one of the cool things about Rogue One is that the face it puts on evil is so much more grounded and human than we have ever seen in Star Wars up to this point.
Yeah.
So the timeline is basically, you have the original trilogy, and it's got the vibes and narrative conventions of mythical, legendary heroes. They're larger than life. They are immune to things that would kill lesser people. They are the narrative's specialist boys and girls, and it all works out for them. The prequels aimed for Shakespearean tragedy and missed.
From a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, yes. You know, what I told you was a heartrending tragedy from a certain point of view. And then Rogue One took a matte-painted backdrop on Luke's hero's journey and turned it into a universe full of real people who deserved better lives. It actually made us believe that there were real human beings in this story.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things to me about Rogue One is that we know they are doomed from the beginning, but by the exact same token, we also know that they've already won. Because when Luke blew up the Death Star and he got a medal about it, it was a foregone conclusion hero victory. There was no way he was going to end that movie without successfully blowing up the Death Star.
Yeah.
Rogue One turned it into a triumphant culmination of a desperate dream we had seen dozens of people die for, and that suddenly makes what Luke did a lot more heroic. And the theme of the movie being that rebellions are built on hope and on trusting others to finish what you start, even if you never see the end of it, means that Luke was a new hope for the rebellion, and he was that formless hope that the Rogue One squadron believed in before they died. So suddenly, Luke goes from being a stock fantasy hero to this extremely profound and important figure, and everything he does starts carrying weight and meaning, even though he clearly isn't thinking about any of that in that movie. He's no thoughts
in that man's brain.
He's no thoughts, head empty. This is just like shooting womp rats back home. He's having a great goddamn time. He is very professional. As soon as he gets in that ship, he is a first-class pilot. But it's just fun to think about, like, everyone's like, this is going to be the most difficult mission we've ever run. He's like, no, it's not that much worse than Beggar's Canyon back home. Womp rats aren't much bigger than 6 feet. And it's like, wait, 6 feet? Wait, hold on. Sorry, Luke, do you live on a death world? Is that why you're like this? So when you start Rogue One, you're like, everyone here is fucked. They are doomed by the narrative. But then at the same time, they're also vindicated by the narrative. We know from minute one, this desperate half-baked plan is going to succeed. And even though the characters don't know that, they only have hope. We have more than that. We know what's coming. And that makes the movie kind of easier to watch almost. It's more cathartic than it is stressful, because it's like we see all these people dying for a dream, and we know that it's going to be worth it. They don't know that. Luke doesn't know it. But we know. We have this privileged, omniscient perspective.
Also, in the same way that, original Star Wars is a very simple story, when you break it down to its raw tropes, put in a new context and rearranged in a way that we hadn't really seen before, Rogue One is a story where we know where it's going, but what happens to get there is completely up in the air.
Yes.
And what, to your point on the slide, what it costs is up in the air. So it's similar, but it's from a bit of a different angle.
Right, but that's exactly it. We know how the story is going to end. The only question is how much it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty decent segue into Andor. Oh
let's
boy.
go.
Yeah, so Andor, as you may or may not have heard about, it's the show about what Cassian Andor was up to before he was in Rogue One. So it's the prequel about the guy we already saw explode. You can see why I didn't immediately jump on the bandwagon to watch this show. Surprise! Fucking slaps. It's probably the best thing Star Wars has ever done.
It's honestly, and it's cool because Gareth Edwards and Tony Gilroy was brought in partway through to assist on some script rewrites, and I think he was there for part of the reshoots. And then Andor is Tony Gilroy's project through and through. He wrote most of them, directed most of them, and was the showrunner of the whole thing, I think. Overlapping responsibilities get a little complicated, but the continuity of vision between them, I'm sure you're going to explain this in a second.
Well, maybe. You know more about this than I do.
No, but the continuity of vision is so apparent, and how it fits in is so good. Because if Rogue One was a hard sell of fleshing out a noodle incident into an entire movie, fleshing out the one guy of a team of 5 in this movie
6,
into his own show is an even harder, again, to your point on the slide, it's such a hard sell. And it had no reason to work on paper when a lot of other Star Wars media suffers from, hey, Mandalorian Season 2 is a stealth pilot for a bunch of other shows. We're going to flesh out every single goddamn corner of this universe and merchandise it to hell and back because, God forbid, there's an unturned stone that we can monetize in this Disney ecosystem. And yet...
Just bite the bullet and make the Jar Jar show, cowards. I know why you won't.
Darth, a Jar Jar story.
You know what? I hope they bring Jar Jar into Andor Season 2. I want to see him racked with guilt over putting the Emperor in power. Anyway, yeah, so Andor is the before Rogue One. All the posters say, the rebellion begins. It is about Cassian, but it is also about how the rebellion is taking form and how he's kind of a convenient POV character to be watching this happen. Rogue One showed us what the rebellion was like before all the main characters showed up to basically guarantee its success. And it also shows what kind of state the galaxy was in to give rise to the rebellion in the first place, which by necessity means it tells a very powerful story about the rise of fascism and what it does to the people under it. So suddenly the Empire's generic faceless villainy gets really sharpened into focus, and what it looks like is human rights violations, torture, prison industrial complexes, rampant injustice, a lot of colonialism, and overall just the banality of evil. And it tells this extremely interesting layered story of just how much the Empire is grinding absolutely everybody down. And the best arc of Andor, everybody agrees, is the prison break arc, which is...
It's so goddamn good.
It's so goddamn good. It's unbelievably powerful. But I think that the arc immediately before it hit me in an interesting way, I think, because of like what we study. You know,
the Aldhani heist?
Yes, because like what we study, you know, history and mythology, the thing that's happening before the Aldhani heist is that this planet that has been colonized by the Empire experiences this wondrous cosmic spectacle every 3 years called the Eye of Aldhani, which is this beautiful crystalline meteor shower that looks like a massive eye closing. And it is sacred to the Aldhani people, and they're supposed to observe it from this sacred valley. And the Empire just casually talks about like, yeah, we've made it harder and harder for them to get to the sacred valley, and every year fewer and fewer of them show up. We're only going to have to wrangle a couple hundred now. Just this extremely casual, like, yeah, we've just made it somewhat more inconvenient for them to be able to do their deep-seated religious practice, which will naturally make it less important in their minds, so it'll be easier to grind them down and assimilate them. And it's just like, oh, holy shit. We're just saying the fucking quiet part out loud about stripping people's cultures away from them.
But what I do like is that this is also juxtaposed with the police state on the Preox Morlana system. In contrast to the Imperial officers being like, we have a plan to grind these people down. The Primor corporate security team is basically an object lesson in a handful of wacky mistakes and people going off on weird limbs to do their specific crusades, not entirely even knowing what they're getting themselves into, has the most absurdly far-reaching knock-on consequences you can imagine.
It does, yeah. This mall cop who's temporarily promoted while his boss is out of town inadvertently kickstarts the rebellion. But I really do think that the Aldhani heist arc has these very interesting, like, undercurrents. And one of them is all of the Imperial staff that are on this planet enforcing colonialism are like, boy, I can't wait to see the Eye of Aldhani. It's going to be very cool, you know, once in a lifetime. As in the same breath, they're talking about like, yeah, we're stripping this away from the cultural heritage of the people whose planet this is because fuck him, right? And it's like, oh my God. Like, that's really it, isn't it? It's like, yeah, I will take everything beautiful from you and make it harder and harder for you to do your practices that mean something to you, because to me, it's just a pretty spectacle, but I have the right to see it because I'm in charge. And it's just like, fuck, man. And then, like, the prison arc is so profound, and it's got this incredible feeling of, like, slow building dread. And it kind of hinges on this thing that is in Rogue One, but sort of gets glossed over, where it's very central in Andor, which is, what's your breaking point? You know? Because, like, in Rogue One, everybody here has reached their breaking point. They're like, yeah, I'll join the rebellion, fuck these guys. But there's a breaking point. When we meet Cassian at the beginning of Andor, he's not there yet. He's like, this'll be fine if I can just get out of here. I just need to lay low. I just need to, I think in the Honest trailer, it's like, the man who would like to be anywhere he is not right now. It's just the montage of like, I just gotta get out of here. But like, that's really it. Cassian is not a rebel yet. He doesn't really like the Empire. He's looking for his sister. You'd be forgiven for forgetting that because it kind of falls out of focus after the first few episodes. But like, he's got his own thing going on. His mom, Marva, is the one who's a lot more into the rebel stuff because she's old. She remembers a time before the Empire. She's seen how shitty everything's gotten so fast, and how, because the thing is, this is a very interesting kind of plot hole fix that they've had to spackle over from the original movies, which is, so you're telling me that all the Jedi got exterminated like 18 years ago when Luke was born? So all this has happened in less than 2 decades? Is that what you're telling me? That's what you're telling me? And then the prequels were like, yep, that's what we're telling you. The Empire has only been around for like 2 decades. Yeah, this whole thing, it's only 2 decades old. And then as soon as they started expanding it out, they were like, so how does that fucking happen? And Marva kind of brings up this concept that it's like, from the perspective of kind of the outer planets, the Empire and the Republic are not that different. The Empire is more overtly fascist, but the Republic was already kind of treating planets like this. It was already enforcing increasingly stringent, laws and restrictions on interplanetary travel and stuff like that. And she's like, we used to be our own independent culture, and now this shit is happening and stuff like that. So she's very much like, I am pro fight the Empire, but also she's very old and she's very sick. And everyone's like, please, for the love of God, take care of yourself. And she's like, no, I must go punch a cop.
Absolutely not. And also, how dare you?
Yeah. But Cassian is just like, Mom, for the love of God, please settle down. You're going to get yourself killed.
Absolutely not. Also, how dare you?
Yeah, but that's the thing. He's not yet at his breaking point. He has not yet become the Cassian we know in Rogue One. Like, he has been in this fight since he was 6 years old, but he has not yet become like, all right, fuck it. And that's one of the interesting things that kind of gets understated in Rogue One, which is like, when the rebels kind of panic when they learn about the Death Star and they're like, oh, we can't possibly antagonize that. It's like, oh, these cowards, whatever, a bunch of weenies. But then you're kind of like, it's a little bit hard to be like, yeah, let's go fight the thing that can blow up an entire planet if you have anybody you care about on a planet. And again, this is the thing that makes the original movies more interesting in hindsight, because when Leia's forced to watch as her entire planet explodes, we're like, oh no, the planet went boom. But now we look at that and it's like, Leia is the bravest person I've ever seen, because when faced with that, she didn't even give them the correct coordinates. She didn't even sell out the rebellion even then. And she did lose everything for it. So essentially, it's kind of like, when is this character going to reach their breaking point, and when are they going to run out of things to lose? And are those going to happen in a different order than I'm expecting? Because Cassian still has stuff to lose at the beginning. He's got friends. He's got his mom. He's got a home. He's got his sister somewhere out there maybe. So he's got a lot to lose, and he's not yet reached the point where it's like, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the rebellion, basically, which is where everybody is at by the time we get to Rogue One. Basically, the last character we see get on board with that is Jyn, because initially she's like, I'm okay to keep my head down and just kind of get through the day.
Andor's like, that's what I thought when I was in space Florida, and look where that landed me.
Yeah.
Narkina 5.
Yeah, it sucked. And that's what's interesting about it, is that we see Jyn basically take the jump from like, fuck it, I don't really want to be involved in this, whatever, to like, actually, you know what, for my dad and his dream, I'll do it. I'll sacrifice myself for the rebellion. And it's like, cool, okay, that's fine. That's a very protagonist-y jump to make. It's like, actually, fuck it, I don't really have anything to live for. I guess I'll just burn myself for a future I'll never see. And then Cassian is like, I got shit going on, man. What are you talking about? So the prison arc, part of what makes it so good is that we see Cassian go from like, well, you know, if I just keep my head down and live it up in space Florida, to like, oh, the Empire must burn. And it's so powerful. And the interesting thing is he goes there pretty quick. And then the hard part is convincing Andy Serkis to also do it. I don't remember his character's name. He's Andy Serkis to me.
Oh, God. Hold on.
Save the comments section. Save the dream.
Wait. No, his name. Kino Loy.
Kino Loy, yeah. Great character. But he's another one where he's like, he's got something to lose. That's the thing. He hasn't reached his breaking point either, even though he's been in prison longer than most of these people, because he's like, if I keep my head down, I will get out of here, and then I can have my life back.
Like, I've only got like 200 cycles left. I'm almost done. You're not going to fuck this up for me.
That's exactly it.
At the beginning, Andor's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I got like 5 years in here, but I mean,
I understand,
I can pass that time kind of quick if I just do my job.
Just vibe. Yeah, he's doing his best. That's the thing. He's been made this cog in a machine, but he's like, the thing that they have to lose right now is freedom. They're like, yeah, this sucks, but I will get out of here. Which is why the Empire is fucking stupid, because it turns out that nobody's getting out. And that is the thing that makes absolutely everybody in the prison snap all at once. Because if freedom is never coming, they have nothing to lose. And suddenly everybody is on board with the rebellion. And I saw some people point this out. The colors of the rebellion are orange and white. It's the prison fatigues. So we know that when they do eventually break out, it's not just Cassian and his friend. The
other guy.
Yeah, the other guy. They put a lot of focus on him, and I was like, oh, he was in Rogue One. That's cool. That was basically it. I was like, is he important? Oh, kind of. Oh, he also dies? Nifty. But we know that it wasn't just them that got out of the crew of 5,000 people that broke out, because clearly some of the others went off and spread the word about the Empire and founded the rebellion and wore the prison colors proudly, and that's fucking rad.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about this arc is that we're following Cassian pretty closely for it. We don't really have an omniscient perspective, so we're seeing him figure out, like, hold on, not only is nobody getting out, but the prison, they're panicking, because if we learn this, we're all going to snap at once. And he says the words, power doesn't panic. And there's just this, it's just so fucking good, guys. You should watch this show.
It's good. It's good. I waited on watching Andor until I saw all the other Star Wars stuff I wanted to see, knowing that nothing will be as good in Star Wars as Andor. So I watched Ahsoka, and then I watched Andor, and I'm like, thank God I watched it in that order.
Yeah. It's really hard to, like, describe everything that's so good about this show, but it is so profoundly being written by people who have thought for a long time about the human angle on the Star Wars universe we've already been shown. And I think that is exactly what Star Wars needed to make it feel richer and more meaningful. Because, like, I talked about this way back when. I don't even remember. It might have been in the fridging video, but honestly, I think that's a little early for this. When Kenobi shows us some stuff of like, young Owen and Beru taking care of, like, 10-year-old Luke Skywalker. I'm like, now I'm sad that those guys got turned into skeletons. Because, like, now I've seen them more as people, you know? And so much of what the Star Wars post-prequel, pre-sequel stuff has been doing has been, hey, this is a story that has people in it, like real people with feelings and stuff. They're not just tropes exactly. They're not just stock archetypes being portrayed skillfully by good actors, you know? Which is very much the case in the original trilogy. It's like, Han Solo is not a complicated character. Harrison Ford is just an extremely charismatic dude. He can't turn it off, which is why he keeps getting cast in shit, even though he clearly doesn't want to act. Yeah. It's like, you can kill off Han, I don't mind. And they were like, you can't do that. You're the best. And he's like, no, seriously, you can kill Han off. It's fine.
You're only getting me for one of these pieces of shit. You might as well kill him off.
So there's a lot of incredible stuff in Andor. And basically everything that Andor is pulling off is something that Rogue One did tightly paced in a movie format. But this exploration of humanity and sort of the slow grind of what an empire like this does to the people under its subjugation is something that really only Andor's timescale can pull off. Because Rogue One, it tells a fast-paced story, and Andor does not. But the interesting thing about Andor is that we know how it's going to end. Yep. And the show knows we know how it's going to end. And we know how every prequel ends. That's the entire point. The heroes we get invested in are dead from the beginning. They struggle and fight for a future that we've already seen. Waiting at the end of Rogue One is Luke Skywalker and his friends with their hero's journey and their power of love and their redemption arc for Darth Vader and so much plot armor. And we see all these rebels suffer and die, lining up that 1 in a million shot, bolstering the only thing in the galaxy that could turn Darth Vader against the Empire and finally end the Emperor's reign. Because really, it had to be Luke. It couldn't have been anybody else. Could have been Leia, maybe. But could have only been one of those two. And nobody knows that going into this. None of these rebels are like, if we can just find Darth Vader's secret kids, and they can convince him that they're still good in him, maybe he can throw the Emperor down a big hole, and we'll all be fine. They don't know what that's going to look like. But we know what it's going to look like. And that's the important thing. And all these stories are very much built on that. You can't really experience Star Wars the way it's quote-unquote meant to be viewed by watching it all in linear order, because there are plot twists in the original that are spoiled by the prequels. We know, if we watch the prequels, that Darth Vader is Luke's father. We know that Luke and Leia are siblings. We know that Yoda's that weird little green guy, which, if you haven't watched Empire Strikes Back recently, is a fun little twist. Because initially it's like, oh, there's a great Jedi sage that lives in this swamp, and also this funky little Muppet guy, voiced by Frank Oz. And then it's like, wait, funky little Muppet dude? You're the sage? But like, that's if you just watch the prequels, you already know that. Yoda's big on the war crimes I must commit grind set. He knows what he's doing.
It's like, Luke is like, oh my gosh, Yoda, you're the master? Yoda's like, finally figured it out, did you? Dipshit you are.
Truly Anakin's you must be. I mean. Oh boy. So, but it's interesting to look at these stories from that perspective, because they are all building up to the fact that we've already seen the original trilogy and it's good and we like it. We already know that all of this hope is going to be rewarded. Everybody we watch die tragically in pursuit of the dream is going to be vindicated. And is that the will of the Force? Is it the will of the plot? Is there really any difference? It doesn't really matter. We know how the story ends, which means we don't share the burden of the protagonists needing to blindly hope that everything is going to be worth it in the end. Because we already know that, but we're watching them struggle against a force that we understand better than they do. Because we know it's all going to work out. We have certainty. We know the story has a happy ending, even if the middle is painful or scary. And the more that we see of that painful, scary time, the more grateful we are that Luke made that shot in his standard issue off-the-shelf hero's journey that he did back in 1977. Yeah. What this made me realize is that Rogue One and Andor recontextualizes the original trilogy by making us think, is Star Wars about Luke, or is it about the galaxy full of people that he saved?
That's good. good.
And in the
That's good.
That's I didn't even bother to do a concluding slide. This is my concluding slide. I can't beat this one. Because that's the thing. In the original movie, it is so strongly about Luke and his fun little hero's journey and his crush on the princess, which we're going to pretend is the thing later for obvious reasons. And it's about, he always wanted to go and join the adventure and be a hero and have a grand old time and a cool sword. And, Belly of the Whale's kind of rough, but that's okay. He's got his friends and he's got his cool new outfit and he's ready to kick some ass. And then you look at all this stuff and you're like, look, Luke is great. He's a sweet kid. He does a lot of important stuff. He saves the entire galaxy. And that means something because of all of these people and everyone else we haven't seen just like them who was suffering under the Emperor's iron boot and needed this help. Luke being a hero suddenly becomes not a mandatory twist of fate because of the genre conventions of the story he's in. It becomes an actual heroic act that saves all these characters. And the more they flesh out this slice of time, the more heroic that original thing ends up feeling, because it stops feeling like it's the trope, it's the guaranteed victory, it's obviously going to work out in the end because they're the good guys and this is a PG movie. It starts turning into something much more powerful and much more meaningful. And we start getting invested in people like Cassian, who not only do we know is dead, we have already seen him die.
Yeah. It really is fascinating, specifically in the Andor, Rogue One, A New Hope pipeline, seeing kind of the narrowing of focus on everything coming together in the final trench run of the 1 in a million shot, and just how much went into that. And for the same reason that the prequels failed, because they tonally were in a completely different world from the story they were trying to tell. It didn't work because they were basically trying to do a reverse hero's journey of the heroes in shitting arc, basically, and the galaxy-wide consequences therein. Rogue One and Andor succeed because it goes very wide in its coverage, and it shows you the entire galaxy, the petty officers who are in dead-end jobs guarding the garrison on Aldhani, the Imperial Security Bureau officers, where it's like, girl power, oh no, it's Margaret Thatcher.
Deidre, no!
To the senators like Mon Mothma, who are trying their hardest to maintain a face of being a pleasant little irritant, to mask the fact that they're doing something much more dangerous underneath. The people like Luthen Rael, who are going out there and connecting all these different wings of the rebellion and trying to organize things and playing this double life on Coruscant and then going out there and doing all kinds of rebel shit, to then the people who are in the trenches in the woods of Aldhani for months and months and months planning one heist that'll fund some nebulous future rebel operation, and seeing how all these things interact. It doesn't make the galaxy small like in some Star Wars where, these people were connected this whole time and this thing was always gonna, play in over here, and it's like, yes, here's the backstory on the Kessel Run that we really didn't need. It makes the galaxy feel bigger because we see how one action in one place has ripple effect somewhere else, rather than having it be every noodle incident is flattened out and stretched out into as much content as the Disney machine can churn.
Yeah.
It is so good in Andor, and then even more so in Rogue One, because we get such a wide look at this galaxy.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about a lot of the Rogue One and Andor similar tie-ins is that it really kind of highlights this general principle of writing, which is everyone is the hero of their own story. Luke and co. have the privilege of being the heroes of this story. So every time we follow somebody else, they're the hero of their own story, but their own story is not necessarily going to end the same way Luke's does. And there's this slightly niche complaint I've had that I think I might be alone in, which is every time I see something that's like, here's another rogue Jedi who managed to escape and is totally still running around in the galaxy somewhere, I'm like, that's cheating. I'm sorry. The whole point was that all the other Jedi are gone. I don't know exactly what's been going on with the Rebels timeline and the fellas from there. Although I did catch, apparently there's a cute little Rebels nod in Rogue One. The subtitles told me that the PA system at one point says Captain Syndulla, report to the yada yada, and I googled that and I was like, that's her. Cool, very nice. But the whole thing with Luke and Obi-Wan is Obi-Wan's yes, all the other Jedi are gone basically, there are just a few survivors hiding out. And it's fine, that means that we can have a few other survivors hiding out. But every time we follow a character, and they get the special protagonist privilege of surviving Order 66 and everything that came after it. I'm like, no, the entire point of Order 66 is that every Jedi was like the Force's specialist person and a hero of their own story, and it didn't save them because of the machinations of a powerful Sith Lord. If we make it so that every character we follow gets to survive, then that really kind of defangs the setting, because it means that having a camera attached to your butt automatically means that you get plot armor, and it's like,
Here's why I disagree, and it's because of your own point that you've made in regards to Rogue One. No, it's okay. The places where we've seen other Jedi make their daring escape from Order 66 is almost universally, because someone else saved their ass and died for it.
That's fair.
Cal Kestis in the Jedi games is, in Jedi Fallen Order, he is shown to have been saved by Yara Tapal, voiced by Travis Willingham, funnily enough.
Yeah, that boy's really everywhere.
He is saved by Yara Tapal, who dies so that Cal can escape.
Right.
Okay, cool. We've seen Kelleran Beck by Ahmed Best save Grogu in The Mandalorian.
I do like that
cool
part. That was very cool.
We've also seen that a handful of the Jedi who did survive get turned into Inquisitors. They cut deals. There's a Jedi Survivor spoiler that I'm not going to spoil. I just finished playing it yesterday. It's a good game. I liked it a lot.
Very cool.
I can't speak to Rebels, but I think part of the whole deal with them is that they're just kind of some latent Force sensitives out in the galaxy who were not in the system, and thus we're kind of, like the equivalent of Luke, where it's like, yeah, you're basically, you would be a Jedi if you had training, but you don't. And then circumstances of plot show up to basically give you an on-the-fly training years after the fact, after Order 66. And it's like, okay, how did Kanan Jarrus survive? I'm sure that's explained in the show. I haven't seen it. But most of the Jedi who make it only do so because someone died to save their ass. And there are a handful of people who didn't have that happen, and then they die very unceremonious deaths afterwards, such as the random Jedi in the first couple episodes of Kenobi, who's like, oh my god, Obi-Wan, it's you, and Obi-Wan's like,
who?
Don't talk to me or my adopted
Ben
son
Kenobi.
ever again.
Yeah.
I'm just dotty old Ben. Yeah, exactly. So I understand the criticism, but I would disagree because the people who did make it out, even if there are arguably too many people who made it out, in their own little stories, they only survived for very hard-fought reasons.
Right, but this is essentially just my same complaint that I have about Age of Calamity, where it's like, if you're gonna tell the story of how these heroes died, tell me the story of how the heroes died. And that's what I like about Rogue One. Because if we're just going by the information in the opening crawl, it was, Rebel spies have managed to get the plans. It doesn't say, and then they all died tragically. Technically, when I first watched it, I was like, maybe they'll make it out. Anything is possible. But watching it the second time, I was like, no, this was kind of how it had to happen. Because if you tell a story about, oh my gosh, this is a scary world, anyone can die, except not any of our main characters with top billing. It's like, okay, so this is a scary world for the NPCs, for the extras with no names. If you tell a story where the important characters who actually have on-screen development die, that tells you something different about this world and the tone armor in it. For instance, really the turning point in the prequels is that Mace Windu dies, even though people are like, come on, he only lost a hand and fell out a window. People in Star Wars survive that shit all the time. But like, that's exactly what I mean. People in Star Wars survive that shit all the time. And now we're getting like the Star Wars rule where getting stabbed through the torso with a lightsaber is no longer a guaranteed way to die. I guess arguably, no, Qui-Gon's another mentor. The mentor thing doesn't count. As established, any story can have a dead mentor. And the fact that we have Rogue One and we have Andor and we have all these side characters in Andor who are just people with realistic lives and realistic priorities. The thing I was talking about how like there are characters that have something to lose and they reach a breaking point when they sort of run out of those things. I'm very glad that we had characters in this show like Mon Mothma, who has a ton of shit to lose. She's got a lot going on. And in the process of bankrolling the rebellion, she's having to deal with her kind of shitty husband and her like daughter who's feeling neglected and is thus falling back on like regressive cultural beliefs that Mon Mothma's like, we're beyond arranged child marriages now. Why are you doing this? But it's like, she's a teenager acting out for attention because her mom's not paying attention to her because it seems like she's got other priorities these days. And part of what makes that so difficult is like Mon Mothma can't just burn her life to the ground and run away, because the thing that she is using to make the world better is her money and her influence. And she she does not have either of those things if she just turns tail and burns it all down and runs off. She can't do what Cassian does. She has something to lose. I'm just continually impressed at how well the people who are writing these can work in human characters. Especially because the originals are such poster boys for stock fantasy hero adventures and all that entails.
To your point, what I like about Andor is that it is willing to show people in a bunch of different circumstances, and it really does go into the internality of their lives and what it feels like to be in those positions and what tensions are pulling on them in various directions on the rebellion side and in the imperial side, and showing that there is a weird mix of forces at play between personal agency and outside forces pushing down on people that lead to choices being made and outcomes that have further knock-on effects elsewhere in the galaxy. And I think what I love about Andor is that it is this huge world, but everybody's still kind of playing on the same chessboard, and actions in one area do have an effect in other places, but it makes the world feel bigger rather than smaller because everybody still has their own agency. It's not a perfect like one-to-one system where, push here means that something gets moved over there. There's unpredictability to it, and with what characters die and what characters survive, it is unpredictable. It's well done. It's a kind of media that Star Wars is not known for giving us.
Yeah, definitely not.
Since the prequels and basically with the exception of Rogue One, the Disney era has not seen tremendously much of it. I'll again go to bat for the Jedi games, Fallen Order and Survivor. I've played part of Fallen Order and I've played all of Survivor. It's a really interesting look at what people who were basically, protagonist adjacent were trying to do in the dark times. And the scope of their missions is much more narrow. They're not trying to save the whole galaxy. Cal isn't out here trying to topple the Empire by himself, because he kind of tries that and he realizes that it's not getting him anywhere because it's a bigger system than he has the power to overcome. So the stories are much more focused in a way that I find interesting, where it's not like, okay, here's basically a diet, Millennium Falcon team running around here, just doing a worse job of it before the real protagonists show up. They have their own goals, and I like that story because it does make the galaxy feel bigger. Whereas there's some stuff in the Ahsoka series that I feel like has a shrinking effect on the galaxy, as much as I do enjoy that show overall, because I like the kind of folkloric tone they strike with it. And about 50% of that is just the Baylan Skull character. It's like, okay, there's rebels going on, and then all of these characters freeze frame through the entire original trilogy, and then we just see them pick up basically where they left off 20 years later. It's like, okay, guys, come on.
Yeah.
But that's an example where it doesn't work. In contrast to an example like Andor, where I think it does. We're operating like 5 different points right now in this conclusion space of the slideshow.
I'm about to add a 6th one, because it's something that just hit me, is one of the special treats that I like about Rogue One, and this is maybe a little bit of a controversial take. I love that Darth Vader breaks the power curve of this movie so bad. From Krennic's perspective, and from the perspective of a lot of the Imperial officers that we see in Rogue One and in Andor, this is a job with very good benefits, and, you can live in comfort on Coruscant or whatever, and everything is going to be great. And I'm really angling for that promotion, but my boss is a little bit of a stickler. And that's part of how they trick us into rooting for Deidre in Andor, is like, oh man, we've all been there, where you say your idea to your boss, and then your coworker says it again louder, and then he gets the credit. And especially it's hard for a woman in the workplace, and then, they get us rooting for her. And then they're like, hey, she's going to torture our other female lead now. And it's like, oh no, wait. wait. This whole operation was your idea. That's part of why I think Krennic makes such a good villain, because he is very much the human face of evil. He is very much petty middle manager bullshit. But that makes it easy to kind of be blindsided when he's like, we're going to demonstrate the super cool project I led. All right, blow up the entire city. And it's like, oh, fuck. Because, the city of Jeddah, we have just seen our heroes have a fun little skirmish there. I remember when I was watching this to prepare for this presentation, there's a little bit where Jyn dives into the middle of the firefight to save a little girl who wandered out into it and get her back to her mother. And then I was like, hey, isn't the city going to explode in like 10 minutes? Doesn't really get much focus, but everyone that we saw there, except for those two guys that bother Luke at that bar on Tatooine, everyone we saw there just exploded, like, immediately. Like, they didn't even realize it was happening before it was over. And that is a little bit haunting, because we're seeing it. We're seeing this moment of absolute horror. And there's a great shot in Rogue One that I'll cut in if I do my editing right, where we see the detonation, and we see it from Bodhi's perspective. And Bodhi's been absolutely through the ringer at this point. Like, this poor guy, he just wanted to get the information about it to somebody who would listen. And instead he got Saw Gerrera, who was like, have fun with this tentacle monster. And the first thing he sees when he gets out is the Death Star has fired on a city, and the tidal wave of Earth is about to explode them. And he's looking at it with this just profound horror. And it match cuts to Krennic looking at the same thing, being like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And it's like, oh,
right, that's where the It's Beautiful meme comes from. Yeah,
but that's the thing. To Krennic, this is his achievement. This is him getting that big promotion. This is him showing his nasty superior officer, that mean old Tarkin, that he's good and cool and awesome and you know, could probably be doing his job. And then he goes and deals with Darth Vader, and we remember, like, oh yeah, he's dealing with space wizards. He thinks this is so important, but we know what's really important, and it's Anakin Skywalker's personal petty drama. Simultaneously, this is telling an incredibly human narrative, but it's doing it in the universe of Star Wars, where the entire evil empire is run by a space wizard playing 3-card Monty with himself. In this movie, he is a monster. Darth Vader is larger than life. He is above everything that these characters care about. And that includes our heroes doing their little rebellion, and that includes Krennic with his, this is my achievement. I am the architect of this great weapon. I'm so cool and important. Where you can just feel the contempt in Vader's voice, where Krennic is like, oh, you know, I'm just pressed for time. And he goes, my apologies, director. And it's like, Krennic, you are in danger, girl. Get out of there. And that's what I like about it. And it's kind of dizzying that, wow, Palpatine's fun little game of running a war against himself and getting declared Supreme Chancellor of everything by the comic relief sidekick and winning the Sith games forever is breaking and ruining so many lives. And that's part of why I'm just so continually impressed at how much Rogue One and Andor aren't just good, they make Star Wars better, which is very impressive, because I love Star Wars. It's dumb as fuck in a lot of places, including in the good movies. There's one other angle on things that these shows make more profound, and that would be the Death Star. Because, of course, the Death Star is kind of just the villainous MacGuffin. It's their evil superweapon. It's their death ray. It's the thing that we need to blow up to win. And in Rogue One, it's very central, of course, because it's the Death Star plans, and it's like, oh, it was created by our protagonist's father, and, you know, that's clearly, obviously very upsetting for her. But then in Andor, it becomes this like horrifying, inevitable guillotine hanging over the story, especially with the big reveal right at the end. In the prison arc, they are assembling these components over and over and over and over again, and they're all these kinds of like hexagonal whatevers, and we don't really know what they are. It doesn't really matter. And then at the very end of the show, at the first season, we see it being placed in position by this little assembly droid, and it slow zooms out, and it slow zooms out, and it slow zooms out across this seemingly endless field of these same components being slotted into place, and it zooms all the way out, and it turns out that the thing that Cassian has been slaving away assembling in prison is the very super weapon that's going to kill him at the end of Rogue One.
Yeah, that's a really good reveal. Also, though, by the same hand, the fact that Cassian basically blew up Narkina 5 means that, short of Luke Skywalker himself, Cassian Andor has done the most to screw over the Empire and had the absolute worst time imaginable doing it.
Yeah, because by delaying the production of the Death Star, you end up in the same boat as it is in Rogue One. Everyone is dying just for the chance to like make it just that little bit more possible to defeat the Death Star and the Empire. By prompting the Prison Rebellion, Cassian delays the construction of the Death Star just enough that it only is fired basically 3 times before it gets blown up, where it's the 2 shots in Rogue One, and then it's the first full power shot to destroy Alderaan, and then Luke blows it the fuck up. And because its production was delayed, we have no idea how many other things they could have hit it with before that. And that's because of Cassian. And that's because of Cassian getting to, what's-his-face, Kino Loy. And You're right. I mean, yeah, like very much an unsung hero situation. But also, one of the things that Rogue One makes clear is that we have no idea how many more unsung heroes there are out there, and that makes the universe feel alive. Because there's that kid in the Aldhani heist arc who's got this like manifesto about rebellion, and basically his thesis on it is like rebellion is the natural state. They have to do so much work to artificially enforce all these rules and bullshit and stuff. They're doing so much work to act like they're omnipotent. And he's like, yeah, there could be like billions of people around the galaxy who all feel exactly the same way we do, and all they need is a little push to realize that they aren't alone in that. And basically, it is the forerunner of the formation of the actual rebellion, because we know that there are characters running around like Saw Gerrera who are doing their fun little absolutely destructive leftist infighting thing of just like...
the galaxy's most paranoid war criminal.
Yeah, nobody but me understands that Empire bad, and nobody but me has the correct praxis in fighting it. And it's like, Saw, chill the fuck out, okay? It is natural to want to rebel against tyranny, but the hard part is organizing. That's why, in the prison arc, Cassian goes to Kino and is like, these people all listen to you, so I need you to talk to them and convince them to all team up, because we're all feeling the exact same way. We can actually act on that. It's so good. There's so many layers to which it is good, and it does the impossible by making Star Wars feel like good writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
It's
quite a feat.
Yeah.
Very excited for Andor Season 2, assuming that comes out probably sometime late this year,
Fingers
early
crossed.
next. I suspect we'll have stuff to say on it after it's out.
Oh, I hope so. It is very promising that the writers of it seem to have kind of a death grip on it and are like, it ends after Season 2. No stealth pilots, no Jedi crossovers, no Baby Yoda. I feel like I could keep going on about this forever. But I don't think that's...
Star Wars for you.
Yeah, truly, yeah. Oh, a Sarlacc pit from whence there is no escape.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. It feels like I've been saying either the same thing for nearly 2 hours or absolutely nothing for nearly 2 hours, which tells me that maybe I should probably stop talking. So hopefully this made sense. Watch Andor, and bye!